All right, so obviously a lot of stuff given to us in the first statement. We have $10,000 in an account, savings account. We want to take most of the money out and invest it in stocks and bonds. You decide to invest 9 times as much as you leave in the account. You also decide to invest 5 times as much in stocks as in bonds. How much will you invest in stocks, how much in bonds, and how much will you leave in savings? So when we're defining our variables, you will have 3 of them, because this is going to be a system of 3 variables. If you look at where the question mark is and look back at the question, that should define the variables for you. You want to find out how much are you investing in stocks. So you're taking the $10,000 and you're divvying it up. Some of the money is going into stocks, some of it's going into bonds, some of it's going into leaving and left in savings account. Okay, so those are your 3 variables. So X equals, I'm just going to put AMT for amount in stocks. Y equals the amount in bonds. And Z equals the amount that we're leaving in savings. All right. We're going to write 3 equations. Any ideas of one? One of them should be easy, I think. We have a total of $10,000. We're taking the $10,000 and we're splitting it up into, some of it's going to be in stocks, X, some of it's going to be in bonds, Y, some of it will be left in savings, Z. Together, all of that has to equal 10,000. What equation could I write to model that? Ashley? Good. The amount that you put in stocks, the amount in bonds, and the amount in savings has to add up to the total that was in your original savings account. All right, now the other ones are a little bit harder. You decide to invest 9 times as much as you leave in the account. So the amount left in the account is Z. You're investing, the investments are the stocks and the bonds, okay? What equation could we write with that? Obviously 9 times is 9 multiplied by something, right? Nine times as much as you leave in the account. How much is left in the account is our Z variable. Now what are we going to set that equal to? You decide to invest. Which variables would be investments? Abby? Perfect. Stocks are investments, so are bonds. So we would add those 2 together, and that has to equal 9 times the amount we leave in savings. And then there's one more. You also decide to invest 5 times as much in stocks as in bonds. Now this is the one some of you will mix up what you multiply by. Is it y equals 5x or x equals 5y? Ashley? It is x equals 5y. Now some of you are like, but it says 5 times as much in stocks, so wouldn't that be x? But no, you're saying x is the bigger amount. So x is equal to 5 times the smaller amount. Like if we were to plug in a number like y is 10, x would be the bigger. 5 times 10 is 50. Okay, so this is the one that some people will mix up when they're doing it. Now, these are not all in standard form like we did yesterday, right? Some of them are in standard form, some are not. So our first step was obviously to define variables and write our equations. The second step is not always going to be using elimination. Now, if all 3 of them were in the XYZ format, sure, we would use elimination. However, if one of them is solved for a single variable, like x equals, y equals, or z equals, I would try to use substitution first. Just like if we knew x equals 2, we could plug in 2 for x anywhere that we saw an x. So since we know x is equal to 5y, we can take 5y and replace it where the x's are in both of the other equations. Now what that will do is take it down from being 3 equations to being just 2, and then we might be able to solve them a little bit easier. So I'm going to take this, again I'm substituting it in for x, so this would become 5y plus y plus z equals 10,000. This one would become 5y plus y equals 9z. Then we're going to combine our like terms at this point. So 5y plus y is 6y. Five y plus y is also 6y. Now, also we need to get it in standard form. So just to save myself from doing rewriting this 2 times, I'm going to want to get the z over to the other side so that they're stacked on top of each other. So maybe just jot down in our notes, we are going to get into standard form. Just using inverse operations. Now when I subtract 9z on both sides, I would be left with a 0 as a placeholder. So the equals 0. And then from here, we're just going to solve the system of equations. Now, we do see the 6's match, but we would like them to be opposite signs. So if you multiply by a -1 here, that's just going to change the sign of everything, which 0 is just 0. And then you can add downward. So 6 plus -6 is 0. 10z equals 10,000. Therefore, z is 10,000. Okay, obviously we're then going to take that number and plug it back into one of the other equations that we found. It probably would be best to plug it into one of the last 2 that we had. Garrett?
How did you get the -6y?
I multiplied by a -1 here. Otherwise, Garrett, you would subtract the equations if you don't, and then you would have 6 minus 6, 1 minus a -9, which would become a positive. Yeah, I multiplied by a -1. Okay, so we'll plug that back in to maybe here. 6y plus 1,000 equals 10,000. Subtract and divide. And then lastly, we need to plug both of those back into one of the originals. Probably the top one is the easiest. The x plus y plus z equals 10,000. You also could just take 10,000 and subtract each of these and get the answer. But you would have x plus 1,500 plus 1,000 equals 10,000. And that will get me 7,500. Now, for the word problems, you are not going to write them as an order triple because they do represent actual values. So remember, x we defined to be the, if you scroll up, was the amount in stocks. So we're going to put 7,500 in stocks. We're going to put 1,500 in bonds. And we're going to leave 1,000 in savings. Anytime you see a percent, it'll have to become like 0.12, 0.06, 0.03. So that's just dividing by 100. So if you use those in an equation, but try to define your variables and come up with. All right, now from here, Do you want to try solving on your own, or do you want me to help you set up? Help. Okay. Once we get our equations, we want to try and use substitution. So again, look for the equation that is solved for the single variable. We see x equals 2z. So, whoa, it's big. We can take the 2z and substitute it in for what variable? X. So I'm going to go up here, get rid of the x, and sub in my 2z. So that will become 2z plus y plus z equals 3,200, which we can combine our like terms either now or later. 2z plus 1z gets me 3z. So I'll have y plus 3z equals 3,200. Now we can do the same thing. When you do substitution, you're going to do it to both equations. We are also going to plug it in there. So that'll get me 0.12 times 2z, which that will get me 0.24. Just like 12 times 2 is 24, that'll get me 0.24z plus 0.06y plus 0.03z equals 255. So all I did was I plugged this in for x, and I did have to multiply by the 0.12 that was already there. Again, collect your like terms. We have z's and z's. So this would be 0.06y plus 0.27z equals 255. Right? So now we have a system of equations that has just two variables, which is what the kind we know how to do from earlier in Chapter 3 and from Algebra 1, right? Now we do have to get matching coefficients here. Personally, you're going to use a calculator anyways, so I would just multiply by this one by a negative 0.06 to get those to match. You could come up with other things if you wanted to, but I try to make it as easy as possible. Just if one's 1, that we can multiply by negative 0.06 in the top. Again, multiplying each of those terms by negative 0.06. And that'll get me negative 0.06y minus 0.18z equals negative 192. The bottom one will stay as is. And then we just add downward. We should get 0.09z. Oops. Equals 63, and then divide both sides by 0.09, which when you divide by a decimal, remember it does actually make the number larger, because you would multiply by the reciprocal. So this will become 700. Okay, take the 700 and plug it back into one of the two from up here. I'd probably pick the first one because it doesn't have decimals. Right? Make it a little easier. Or, actually, you could plug it in to this one. That would be even easier. Right? 700 times 2 is 1,400. So you can do that one. You can plug it into any of them, as long as it's one that only has the two variables in it. So let's do that one. And then go ahead and find what your value of y is. And I'm going to pass out your homework so you guys can start on it here in class. Now, when you're doing this on the homework, so that you don't have to write out in words what the answers are, you're welcome to just go up here and write it next to how you defined the variables. So this would be 1,400 that's in the growth fund. This would be 1,100 that's in the income fund. And this would be 700 in the money market account. That way you don't have to write out all the words as like labels at the end. And then the study guide